I understand we're also going to hear presentations from OEWD as well as from the MTA, or is that not going to happen?
Thank you very much. I'm going to try to work within our time limits here. As you heard from planning, the question before you tonight is whether the city has adequately analyzed the potential physical impacts of this project under CEQA. It is not whether this is a good project. That is the subject of our land use and affordable housing and economic and workforce development and parks and open space plans and many others, and all of that is laid out in excruciating detail in those plans. And as planning staff noted, the question of how and when and to what level the Navy will complete is governed by CERCLA, not CEQA. For the last 20 years, the question of how the shipyard gets cleaned up, to what levels, where, and when, has been governed by CERCLA, and regardless of what happens tonight, it will continue to be. It is a fundamental misstatement of law to imply otherwise, and none of the appellants could offer a coherent response to that basic fact. However, while neither the city nor the developer have any legal authority over the cleanup decisions themselves, it is important to remember that in 2004, we entered into a legally binding conveyance agreement with the Navy that fully addressed how the shipyard should be conveyed for development in light of that ongoing federal effort under CERCLA. The conveyance agreement was the result of years of negotiations led by then new supervisors, or Supervisor Maxwell, and a group of local environmental justice leaders regarding how to implement Proposition P in light of the information coming out of the CERCLA process and the city's maturing redevelopment plans. Many of the issues being raised today were already addressed in that agreement. First, the conveyance agreement as a matter of contract strengthened EPA's and DTSC's ability to require the Navy to clean up the shipyard to levels that are fully safe for people and the environment in light of our redevelopment plans. And we, in turn, agreed to abide by that determination. And EPA and DTSC have used that leverage to apply much stricter standards at the shipyard than are implied elsewhere, to cause huge amounts of full excavation on the site, and to require that everything that should come out of the ground will. The EPA standard is so strict that as a general matter, the only low-level materials that are allowed to be left behind can be touched, eaten, and breathed every day for 30 years safely. But as an added precaution, EPA is requiring the classic Brownsfield solution of having the project's parks, roads, and buildings act as a further barrier against these low-level materials, just like in countless other Brownsfields projects like Mission Bay, Treasure Island, and Emeryville. This is neither a novel concept nor a new one, and these added protections are being applied even though on a number of our parcels, EPA has publicly acknowledged that such extra protection is not even technically required. It's important to understand, because you hear a lot about this confusion between cap and cover, that other than E2, which is the one place where there is still a debate years down the road to be had as to what the final remedy is going to be, that the Navy is requiring that everything that needs to come out of the ground has to come out of the ground. So the idea that an earthquake would expose us to some risk, actually, if we have 30 years to fix the sidewalk, which is covering the low-level materials that meet the EPA standard, we have addressed that risk. Second, based on tens of thousands of soil and groundwater samples and a vast array of other studies, the conveyance agreement also provided that the land would be conveyed for development in phases as parcels are complete, instead of waiting to develop until the entire cleanup is complete. What was true in 2004 is even more true now. The shipyard is one of the best characterized sites in the country. The precise process that Ms. Subra described in her testimony of testing and retesting and using split samples is exactly what has occurred at the shipyard over the last 20 years. It would be unreasonable to expect Ms. Subra to review all that data, but Amy Brunel, who's sitting to my left, who's worked on this project for the Department of Public Health for 17 years, has. EPA and DTSC have. Mark Ruperto, the lead for EPA on this project, is here tonight. These studies have repeatedly and emphatically shown that there is no adjacency risk from subsurface materials. That is why EPA and DTSC have repeatedly approved the artists working on the shipyard every day, some for decades, next to active remediation sites, and why construction workers on the site actually don't wear any special gear. We haven't evicted the artists because reams of scientific evidence show that there is no reason to do so, and those same reams of data show it is safe to develop the shipyard in phases. And since the conveyance agreement, federal funding for the cleanup and still more testing has gone up dramatically. And with now over $700 million spent and vast areas of the shipyard fully remediated, awaiting only regulatory closeout, our confidence, and more importantly, the confidence of the environmental regulators in those basic conclusions has only gotten stronger. I also want to note that the phased development approach simultaneously with cleanup is not at all unusual, including on Superfund sites. In fact, it's very common in the base closure world, just locally, at Fort Ord in Monterey, at McClellan in Sacramento, at Alameda, at South Weymouth in Boston. Fort Ord, McClellan, and South Weymouth are all Superfund sites. All are successfully undergoing phased development alongside the cleanup. And in fact, none of those bases were as far along under the CERCLA process as the shipyard is now. These are the facts. There was more that I wanted to cover just briefly. You know, one of the unfortunate elements of CEQA appeals and the more generalized claim that a project needs more process and more study is it is all too often used as a strategy for trying to kill a project without actually confronting the merits. And that strategy shouldn't work here for two reasons. First, our EIR is the longest, most detailed, exhaustive EIR that we've ever done in San Francisco. The idea that we have not thoroughly analyzed the potential physical impacts of the project under that legal standard is frankly implausible. Second, the project as a whole has been the subject of the most extensive, longest community-based planning effort ever undertaken in the city. The community process on this project goes back almost 20 years. The community has been involved in this project from the very beginning, deciding long before even a developer was selected, deciding what the priorities should be, deciding the developer should be selected, and have participated in that process in hundreds and hundreds of meetings ever since. It's also been extensively vetted by various city committees, commissions, public agencies. We have come to the Board of Supervisors early and often on this project, and of course this project was approved overwhelmingly by the voters in 2008. The most important thing here is not approving this project won't do a thing to help the cleanup of the Hunters Point shipyard.
Thank you.